Part 19. The Liu family's wife is so sweet. Author, Yoon. Chapter 181. Chapter 181 The Feeling of Home. Everyone couldn't help laughing when they heard what Lu Lin said. They felt that if the two children got along well, then the marriage would definitely be settled. Everyone was clamoring for Lu Lin to decide the venue now. Even the little guy Zhongwanan joined the queue shouting to decide the venue. Lu Zizhu watched them laughing without saying a word. He felt that this was the feeling of home, lively. The meal tonight was very good in such a lively atmosphere, and it took a long time to eat. If it were not for the two children who have to go to school tomorrow, I might have stayed up all night. Zhongwanan went upstairs and ran straight to Lu Zizhu's room. His speed surprised Lu Zizhu. "Why are you running so fast?" Lu Zizhu asked as he opened the door and went in. Zhongwanan put her fingers between her lips to signal him to stop talking. "The baby is sleeping," she said softly. Lu Zizhu walked over and smiled helplessly. Looking at the dolls covering him, he suddenly felt that they were actually well groomed. "Aren't you going to bed yet?" Lu Zizhu asked in a low voice, cooperating with her. Sleep right away," Zhongwanan said, climbed into bed and covered herself with a quilt. "I mean, don't you go back to your room to sleep?" Lu Zizhu asked awkwardly. Without even looking at him, Zhongwanan hugged the two dolls and tucked them under the quilt and said, "Mom and Dad can't be separated, otherwise the children will be very hurt." "You little hooligan," making excuses again, Lu Zizhu said with a dark face and went to the bathroom. When he came out from the shower again, Zhongwanan had already fallen asleep. He hadn't changed his clothes or taken a shower. Lu Zizhu looked at her for a while, shook his head helplessly, pulled the quilt she kicked off and put it back on her body, then lay down. On the other side. "Have a good night's sleep." Zhongwanan went to bed early last night and got up early. After she got up, she was very sensible and did not wake up Lu Zizhu. She carefully rearranged the dolls around her and placed them on the bedside. When the dolls were placed, she was stunned. "There is one missing doll." She turned her head and looked at the bed, not the ground. Just as she was trying to remember whether she had hugged the baby last night, Lu Zizhu suddenly turned over and faced her. Her eyes lit up and she discovered that the missing doll was in Lu Zizhu's arms. It seems so cute. What's going on?" At that time, Zhongwanan foolishly didn't take a photo of him as a souvenir, otherwise it would definitely be a black photo of him in the future, with an old man sleeping with a baby in his arms, and those who don't know would think that he has some special hobby. After all the dolls were gathered, Zhongwanan carefully got out of bed and went to her room next door. She didn't move everything when she left, but she also left a lot of clothes in the closet. She went to bed without changing her clothes last night and her clothes were wrinkled, so she opened the closet and matched them with a new set of clothes to wash up. After putting on the clothes, I went to Tang Yu's room. "Mom, what should I do if my school bag is not here?" she asked. "I'm about to go back and get it for you," Tang Yu said while putting on his coat. Zhongwanan smiled and leaned over to hug Tang Yu. "Thank you, Mom." "Idiot, thank you for nothing. You can have breakfast here. Don't be naughty. Mom will come back after getting your bag." Zhongwanan sat on the edge of the bed and nodded obediently. Tang Yu stroked her furry head and opened the door and walked out. When Lu Zizhu woke up, he saw the neatly arranged dolls next to him. He looked at the dolls in his arms and put them over and said, "Mom has gotten up, and Dad is getting up too. You guys should be good." He has also entered the role. He looked at the absence of Zhongwanan in the room and did not rush to look for her, because he knew that the little girl would not go far. If she did, she would definitely tell him. After all, she was so good and would not let her go. He was worried. End of this chapter. The Liu family's wife is so sweet. Author, Yoon. Chapter 182. Chapter 182 Long time no see. Sure enough, just as he was thinking about it, the door was pushed open. When he looked back, he found that the little girl was looking in like last night. Luzes who smiled gently at her and the little girl ran in. 1 second he was still thinking about her, and the next second she had already come in. He thought this must be a connection. Xiao's Huzi is awake, Zhang Wanan asked sweetly, raising her head. Yes, how can Xiao's Huzi continue to be lazy when the master is awake? Should I give a greeting to the master, Luzes who said and pinched her cheek unconsciously. He found that he loved pinching her cheeks recently, maybe because she had flesh that was easy to pinch. Zhang Wanan smiled and hugged him, saying, the way little Huzi sleeps with the baby in his arms is so cute, so cute. Luzes whose face turned slightly red when she heard what she said. It was okay not to mention it, but he felt a little embarrassed when she said it. In fact, he didn't want to sleep with the baby in his arms last night, but he fell asleep when he saw Zhang Wanan holding the baby in his arms. It seemed like he was hugging a baby by accident. Is breakfast ready? Luzes who began to change the subject. Zhang Wanan nodded, it's ready. You can go and eat. Then you go down first, I'll go wash up first, and I'll go down in a while. Then I'll wait for you here. After Zhang Wanan said that, he sat on the bed and picked up a baby. Luzes who didn't say anything when he saw her sitting on the bed, he just smiled and went to wash up. After washing up, the two of them went downstairs together. The breakfast on the table was the same as usual, except that there were 2 more sets of tableware because the 2 people were back. Huh? Where's Aunt Tang? Why didn't you see her? Haven't you come down yet? Luzes who asked suspiciously when he saw that Tang Yu was not at the dining table. Anan didn't take her school bag. Your Aunt Tang went back to get it for her, otherwise she won't be able to go to school because she's hungry, Lin 11 replied. Luzes who nodded and said nothing. Tang Yu also came back when she was halfway through breakfast. It started to rain lightly outside. She walked in with the cold air. As soon as she entered the door, she couldn't help but rub her hands and muttered, it's getting colder and colder today. Please wear more clothes when you go to school later. Thank you, Mom. Zhang Wanan jumped off the chair and ran over with the toast and handed it to Tang Yu. Tang Yu took it and took a bite and praised, Anan is so sensible. Come and eat quickly, it's still hot, Lin 11 greeted. After breakfast, Zhang Wanan picked up her school bag and was about to go out. She looked up at Tang Yu and asked, are you still staying here tonight? Mom. No, we have to go back to our own homes today. Okay, Mom, remember to pick me up in the afternoon, Zhang Wanan said, feeling a little disappointed, and took Luzes Hu's hand and walked out. Xiao's Huzi, it's been a long time since I took a car with you to go to school. Zhang Wanan climbed into the car and snuggled into Luzes Hu's arms because of the cold. Yes, it's been a long time. This feeling has been a long time coming. I can only sit this once. I don't know when the next time will be. I'm going back to my home tonight. Zhang Wanan wrapped her fingers around the corner of Luzes Hu's clothes and said. Luzes Hu's eyes darkened and he pressed her little hand that had been stirring and said, it's not like we won't see each other anymore. Why do I feel that what you said is so sad, and coupled with the weather, it feels indescribable, Luzes Hu said and looked at it. I glanced outside and saw that the rain was getting heavier and heavier. Zhang Wanan seemed to have realized it, and smiled sheepishly, then I won't say it, he. Luzes Hu asked the driver to take Zhang Wanan off first, and he left with peace of mind after Zhang Wanan entered the school. As soon as Zhang Wanan left and the car started again, he took out the manuscript he had written from his bag. There was going to be a competition today, so he had to take a good look at it. End of this chapter. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Lu family's wife is so sweet. Author, Yoon. Chapter 183. Chapter 183. Talk less and do more. Are you ready? As soon as Luzes who entered the classroom, Avril saw him and ran over to ask him. Luzes who glanced at her and responded calmly, ready. Avril was a little flustered by what he saw. She couldn't help but glance at Luzes who and asked cautiously, are you still thinking about what happened yesterday? When Luzes who heard her talk about what happened yesterday, he glanced at her angrily and said, I would have forgotten it if you didn't tell me. Well, blame her for talking too much. Luzes who didn't talk to her anymore. He sat back and continued to read the manuscript. He wanted to make it the most perfect and flawless. Looking at your attitude, are you going to finish the script? Avril asked. He was quite easy to follow and talked a lot. She followed him as soon as he sat down. Although they were at the same table, couldn't they just be quiet for a while? Yes. Ah. That's commendable for your courage. I just heard from the class next door that not many of the students in the school can complete the draft. If you add this to your draft and your writing skills, you will definitely win. I hope so. Luzes who still spoke coldly. Definitely. Come on. For your safety, Avril encouraged him on the side. Are you free? Don't you need to read the manuscript? Luzes who finally couldn't help but ask her. Avril knew what was going on as soon as she saw his frown, and quickly lowered her head and stopped talking to read the manuscript. Generally, Luzes who might be angry just by frowning. If she went down for a while, she might be knocked down. The first thing to save your life is to talk less and do more. The two of them looked at the manuscript quietly. After a while, Avril stopped arguing. As a result, another Gujinchu appeared. He started arguing as soon as he entered the door. He was already the kind of person who was very popular in the class. As long as he said a word, he can move the whole crowd. Beautiful and handsome men, Mr. Gu, am back. It's been 2 days and I wonder if you have missed me, he shouted loudly without any fear. Think about it. Think about it. I really want to. The girls screamed, and the boys held their throats to pretend that the girls screamed. In short, the whole class was boiling, as if a pot was exploding. Luzes who and Avril frowned and looked at the stupid Gujinchu with a tacit understanding this time. Gujinchu seemed to have noticed the eyes here that were incompatible with those hot eyes. He raised a finger to signal everyone to stop arguing, and quickly regained control of the noisy situation. He walked over nonchalantly and stood in front of the two of them with his arms on the table and raised his eyebrows and asked, What? Did you two college bullies make a noise? Yes, Avril said coldly and pushed his hand down on the corner of her desk in disgust. Huh? Why are you still angry? Didn't I quickly control the situation? It seems that I am very sensible. Gujinchu smiled flatteringly and took out 2 bottles of drinks from his bag and placed them separately. At the corner of the table between the two of them, I'll buy you a drink. You are so awesome and know how to control the situation. Why don't you participate in this competition? Don't you know that our class wasted a spot? Avril asked him coldly. There are only 2 people in the 3-person quota to participate. If Luzes who doesn't come, then she may be the only one in their class to participate, and someone in their class will definitely laugh at them. Oh? No, why are you angry with me? Can I just stop talking? Gujinchu's voice rose a few decibels in excitement, making everyone in the class couldn't help but turn their heads to look at him. Avril felt a little embarrassed when they looked into their eyes. She said irritably, out of sight, out of mind. Stay away from me and go back to your seat. We have to go to the game soon. Okay, just you cows, go ahead. Gujinchu was also very irritable. End of this chapter. The Lu family's wife is so sweet. Author, Yoon. Chapter 184. Chapter 184. How important is a good attitude? Luzes who had been sitting aside, was very confused. He didn't know why the two of them suddenly quarreled. Why was there no warning? The noise was sudden. He looked at Avril and then at Gu Jinchu on the other side. His face looked very bad. "Look what I'm doing." Avril was so angry that she couldn't even talk to him anymore. Luzes who rubbed his head in embarrassment. He seemed a little embarrassed, and he was attacked inexplicably. This may be retribution for him usually being mean and aggressive to others for no reason. After reading the manuscript for a while, someone from the next class came to call them, saying that the time was almost up and everyone was here and they should go. Luzes who took a deep breath and stretched out his hand towards the window to straighten his collar. Very handsome, he thought narcissistically. This selection is held by teachers in their own schools and cadres and members of various student unions. As for other ordinary students, there are only a few representatives, and not all of them participated, because this is not the home field, and other schools that win the competition will be the home field. Because the speech they gave this time was about the dear motherland and the 70th anniversary of the motherland, they wanted to set an example for the elementary school students who would come to their junior high schools in the future, letting them know that patriotism is not a trend, but something deep in their hearts. Kind of responsibility. The students who participated in this selection were all drawing numbers in the background, and the number drawn was their fate. Luzes who drew number 9. He rubbed the number in his hand repeatedly. He was praying for good luck, even though he knew it was absurd and superstitious. But he just wanted to see the little girl's eyes light up when she suddenly saw him. Contestant number 1 has already tremblingly stepped onto the stage to start the show at the call of the host. Contestant number 2 behind him was very nervous, unable to sit or stand still, but looking at it, it seemed that he was not just contestant number 1 or number 2. Nervous, other players were also very nervous, and some even went to the toilet in such a state of nervousness. Actually, Luzes who was not nervous, but he thought he should not be very nervous. "Are you nervous?" It seems that nothing has been finished yet. When number 6 came on stage, Avril leaned closer and asked in a low voice. She was number 13, even behind Luzes who. "Well enough." "No, I brought the water that Gu Jinchu gave us. Let's have a drink," she said, shaking a bottle of water in one hand. Luzes who took it, opened it, and took a sip. "I regret having a fight with him just now, and I don't know why I suddenly want to fight with him," Avril said suddenly. Luzes who screwed on the bottle cap and shrugged. "I find it baffling too." "Well, it seems I should think about my reasons," Avril said in annoyance. "But it seems that now is not the time," Luzes who reminded. "Then think about it later. Maybe he will have calmed down when we get back later. I know his fool very well and will never really get angry unless it is something else that touches his bottom line." When Avril said this somewhat proud, she really knew him. For example, what he doesn't like, what he likes to eat, what he doesn't like to eat. There are many, many, many things that she understands inexplicably. As time went by, Avril Lavigne and Luzes who would keep chatting about various things. As they chatted, they felt that they were no longer so anxious inside, and even started to get silly and happy. People next to them would helplessly shake their heads and laugh when they saw their silly joy. They are stupid, and even laugh at them for not paying attention to it for a while, and they will definitely not be elected. They pretended not to have heard these words. But they feel that those who laugh at them don't know how important it is to have a good attitude. As we chatted, we arrived at number 9. When the host announced that number 9 was coming on stage, Luzes who was already standing straight behind the scenes. For a moment, the girls and boys backstage were surprised when they noticed him. After all, the suit fit him so well. Attractive. The girls looked at his proud long legs and couldn't help but swallow their saliva. Avril couldn't help but click her tongue inwardly when she saw their nymphomaniac looks, wondering what there was to worry about, like how could such an outstanding person like him look at them. He only had such a little girl in his heart. End of this chapter. The Liu family's wife is so sweet. Author, Yoon. Chapter 185. Chapter 185. It's hard to stand out. So much so that there once was a girl who liked him very much. Later, when she saw how good he was to that little girl, she gave up. She knew that all the tenderness didn't belong to her, so she had no choice but to let it go before it sprouted. The dead little bud was buried deep in my heart, and then slowly, slowly forgotten. This prosperous age is as you wish. Luzes, whose last words were followed by a burst of thunderous applause, which pulled Avril back from her thoughts. How are you? How do you feel? Luzes, who returned to the backstage and grabbed Avril and asked, his eyes sparkling with anticipation. Avril was stunned for a while and nodded with a smile. Very good, just listen to the thunderous applause. After she finished speaking, her eyes fell on his hand on her shoulder. Luzes, who also reacted, hurriedly took his hand off, and smiled awkwardly. Sorry, I'm too excited. Avril smiled back at him to indicate that it was okay, then she looked at him and said sincerely, I have never seen you so rude as you are today. How much do you want to see her again and again? It's just a different family. That's all. Why do you miss her so much? She didn't say the rest. Luzes, who still smiled awkwardly, it's your turn soon, come on. Luzes, who encouraged her. Yes, Avril nodded and pointed to the other side and said, let's go sit over there. Luzes, who nodded, and the two of them ran over there and sat down. As time went by, the 108 people in the entire department had finished their speeches at noon. When the host called everyone to come back on stage, the teachers in the audience were still whispering. In an instant, the stage that was empty just now became very full. 108 people stood there neatly, all looking at the judges and teachers in the audience with expectant eyes, as if everyone hoped that they could be selected. After all, this opportunity is very important. If you are selected, you will gain face for the school and for yourself. However, only 8 out of 108 people can be selected, which is only a fraction. So it's hard to stand out from so many people. The teacher sitting in the middle held the microphone and coughed twice. For a moment, everyone looked at him and held their breath. In such a big place, it was like you could hear the sound of a pin dropping. Luzes, who felt that he was in the same mood as everyone present. He was very nervous. The last time he felt so nervous in his memory seemed to be because of Jongwonan's illness, but he didn't expect that this time it would be because of her. I always felt like I was falling into her hands. The teacher in the audience gave a few words to convince him, but when he actually said the names and classes of the selected candidates, Luzes, who was really nervous. Just as he was holding his breath, he felt something move next to him. When he lowered his head, he found that it was Avril's hand grabbing him underneath. Don't be nervous, she whispered. Luzes, who suddenly wanted to laugh. Why did he feel that the person next to him was more nervous than him, but now he was telling himself not to be nervous? He nodded slightly, then turned his head again to listen attentively to the results announced by the teacher. The selected students are number 100, number 99, number 70, number 62, number 51, number 18, number 13, and number 9. Let us congratulate these 8 students. The numbers are read from the largest number to the smallest number. When Luzes, who heard his phone number read out from the teacher's mouth, he felt his heart finally drop. He thought at that time that his efforts these days had not been in vain. The little girl could see him, and he could also see the little girl. After the teacher finished reading, people on the stage lamented that they were not selected, and those who were selected shouted excitedly, including Avril Lavigne. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Liu family's wife is so sweet. Author, Yoon. Chapter 186. Chapter 186. Why do I feel out of place? She hasn't thought that she can be selected. After all, she is confident in many things, but not confident in many things. This is the one thing she is not confident about. After all, there is a probability that 8 out of 108 will choose her. Extremely small. But fortunately she is lucky. We were selected, Avril excitedly patted Luz's who and said. Luz's who just smiled and said nothing. Avril suddenly felt embarrassed. She calmed down her emotions slightly, but the smile on her face did not diminish at all. Congratulations, Luz's who said suddenly. Same joy, Avril said playfully. Okay, students, don't be discouraged if you are not selected, and don't be too proud if you are selected. There will be many more activities like this in the future. I hope everyone will continue to work hard. Students who participate in the selection will receive extra points. Our efforts will not be in vain. This is also a way to improve everyone's eloquence, said an old man with gray hair who had been sitting at the edge. Just listening to his words made me feel very comfortable. Isn't this the old principal? A voice suddenly said in the crowd. For a time, everyone looked at the kind old man seriously. After a closer look, they found that it was actually the old principal who had retired for many years, but sometimes the school would call him when there were some activities. But they didn't expect this. He was so low-key that he actually sat at the very edge. Many of his deeds are still circulated in schools. Hello, principal, welcome to the principal, all the people on the stage bowed and shouted in unison. The old principal nodded slightly. Thank you, children, you are all very courageous, and you will all be the pillars of the country in the future. I hope you will work harder in the future and become useful people to society. The children nodded seriously after hearing the principal's words, and said loudly and with tacit understanding, be a useful person to society. Contribute your own strength to the country. Okay, they are all good children, the old principal nodded and said. After chatting with the old principal for a while, the children went back to their respective classes after the teacher gave an order. It was still after class time. When Luz's who and Avril returned to the classroom together, they found that Gu Jinchu was lying on the table, fast asleep. Avril pointed to that side and said, I went over to talk to him for a while. We just had a fight. I don't know if he has calmed down. Luz's who nodded, you go ahead, I'll go back to my seat first. Avril walked over and did not poke Gu Jinchu. Instead, she poked his deskmate and asked quietly, is he asleep? My eyes are closed anyway, I don't know if I'm asleep or not, my deskmate replied in a low voice. Can I sit here with you for a while? Avril continued to ask. Gu Jinchu's deskmate stood up generously and said, sit down. Avril thanked her and sat down, then lay on the table and closed her eyes. Why did she suddenly feel a little tired? After Gu Jinchu opened his eyes and looked at the face in front of him, he suddenly frowned. He reached out and poked her hard, and then said hey. Avril got up with confusion in her eyes, as if asking him why he pushed her. I was talking about how Zhang Xiang suddenly had a nightmare about you when I was sleeping. It turns out that you were pointing your face at me. When did you come back? Gu Jinchu said jokingly. Avril was half awake when she heard that he said she had a bad face. She hurriedly touched her own. When she realized that he was joking, she frowned and punched him and said, you have a bad face. Gu Jinchu smiled and did not resist. He asked eagerly, how is it? Have you been selected? Avril fell back in her chair and said easily, of course, you don't even know who I am. Yes, you are the best. Since you have been selected, then Lao Lu must have also been selected, Gu Jinchu said and turned to look at Luz's who. Luz's who was looking down at the book at the moment and did not notice his gaze at all. Tisk, 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 look at what you are capable of, why do I feel so incompatible with you? Gu Jinchu suddenly felt a little inferior. End of this chapter. The Lu family's wife is so sweet. Author, Yun. Chapter 187. Chapter 187 He is very Buddhist. Avril laughed, she punched Gu Jinchu again and said, "We don't think so. Don't dislike yourself first." Gu Jinchu smiled and took out a piece of candy from the drawer and put it into her hand and said, "Actually, I am also very good. For example, when I play basketball, girls will scream for me." "Yes, yes, you are the most charming," Avril said, playing with the piece of candy. Gu Jinchu was a little angry when he saw that she didn't want to eat, so he took it and tore it apart and stuffed it into her again and said domineeringly, "You can eat it if I give it to you." "Bogey, I'll just eat it, and I didn't say I won't eat it," Avril said and put the candy into her mouth. "Well, it was quite sweet. This was given to me by someone else. I gave it to you even if I didn't want to eat it." Loses who said this with a bit of complaint in his mouth, which was so cute. Avril smiled and said nothing. It turns out he wasn't angry, or he had forgotten it a long time ago, or maybe he just wanted to give her a step down and didn't want her to be too embarrassed as a girl. "Can you two treat me to lunch? I have no money." Gu Jinchu said sheepishly. "Why do you have no money again? You're such a jerk," Avril couldn't help but say him. "I don't want to, but there are some things that make me want to spend some money. For example, yesterday I bought a new basketball with the little pocket money I had left," he explained. "Why do you always buy football? If you like it, buy it. If you like it, even if you don't use it, you still have to provide it." "Don't know. To put it in layman's terms, it's just like you top academics buying books. Is quite popular." Gu Jinchu is indeed as poor as he said. Today is only Monday and he has no money. He doesn't know if his parents will give him some money or let him eat and drink until death. At noon, when Loses Who and Avril invited him to lunch, they each added a chicken drumstick to him. Just looking at the two drumsticks, Gu Jinchu felt like he was going to cry in the next second. He was really excited to the point where tears filled his eyes. He almost knelt down to the two of them. Loses Who looked at his look and said he had no future. Because Gu Jinchu even said back, "If you are promising, don't look for my brother when you are poor one day." "Oh," Loses Who responded coldly. Just this one word made Gu Jinchu so angry that he would have beaten him if he hadn't been eating the things he bought. Although he certainly couldn't beat Loses Who, everything was possible, right? Asterisk. The matter of giving a speech at a nearby primary school was quickly put on the agenda, the day after the competition was completed, and Loses Who suddenly felt very satisfied with the school's efficiency. Other than Lin 11 and Gu Jinchu Avril, no one else knew about going to give a speech. To be sure, Loses Who also specifically asked those who knew not to spread this matter to Zhangwanan's ears. Although his parents are not very reliable in other matters, they will definitely keep this matter confidential. After all, this matter is about their future daughter-in-law, and they should not want to disturb the matter. The school prepared a bus. After gathering at school in the morning, we got on the bus one by one. 8 people of similar age should have a common language, but after getting on the bus, they all remained silent and closed their eyes. Even the teacher following the car found it incredible. This kind of activity had happened before, but the former students would get excited and make noises as soon as they got on the bus. This was the first time that the teacher followed the car in such a quiet situation. The first elementary school they arrived at was not Zhangwanan's school. Their school was divided into 2 elementary schools, one was Zhangwanan's school and the other was Chunfeng Primary School. The one who came in the morning was Chunfeng, and the one who went in the afternoon was Zhangwanan's school. Loses Who was not in high spirits when he went to Chunfeng. After all, there was no one he wanted to meet. His task was just to give a good speech. He was still very Buddhist. End of this chapter. The Lu family's wife is so sweet. Author, Yun. Chapter 188. Chapter 188 Observing the Situation. The speech in Chunfeng ended nearly an hour earlier than planned, so after communicating, they got on the bus again and went to Jongwonan's school, and decided to have lunch there. When I went there, the primary school students had already finished school and the restaurant was overcrowded. After the 8 students who gave speeches were freed up, 6 of them started to squeeze in and rush in. The remaining 2 students who did not rush were walking on the playground at the moment. That is, loses who, Avril Lavigne. There are a lot of people in the restaurant right now anyway, we have plenty of time, let's go there later, Avril suggested. Loses who nodded. Although he agreed with Avril's proposal on the surface, he was restless inside. He was eager to see the little girl. He wanted to meet her by chance in a restaurant and then go have dinner together. When Loses who walked to the door of the restaurant, he couldn't help but glance at it. After seeing the empty bench at the door, Loses who walked towards it. As he walked, he didn't forget to say to Avril, "Let's go sit over there for a while and stand there for a while, I'm a little tired this morning." "Oh okay," Avril hurriedly followed. After Loses who sat on the bench, the closer he got to the door of the restaurant, the more uneasy he became. From time to time, he stood up and took a few steps. As he walked, he would accidentally glance out of the window. He couldn't help but see so many people inside. Somewhat irritable. This is the elementary school he went to before. It stands to reason that he would feel a sense of intimacy when he comes back after graduation, but he doesn't. He just feels irritated, as if he has completely forgotten to walk through this once familiar campus again to relieve the previous feeling. Sitting on the bench, Avril looked boredly at the little ants crawling under her feet and found it very interesting, but whenever a pair of feet flashed back and forth in her eyes, even though she was good-natured, she couldn't help it. "Loses who, can you sit down for a while? Are you so eager to eat? How hungry are you?" She couldn't help but stretched out her hand to pull Loses who over and forced him to sit down. Loses who knew that he had lost his composure, so he did not speak any more. However, after being pressed down by Avril, he became more honest. He did not get up and move around again, but just sat there looking into the distance like a puppet. "Shall we go in? There aren't many people left." After an unknown amount of time, Avril poked Loses who's arm to bring him back from his thoughts. Loses who swiped and stood up from the chair because the movement was too big, which made Avril jump. Avril couldn't help but look at him. After looking at him for a few times, she asked cautiously, "Are you feeling uncomfortable? Or are you tired?" Loses who looked at her doubtfully and said innocently, "No." Then he walked into the restaurant coolly with his pockets in his pockets. Although Avril was there for a while, she didn't know it unless they told her, so she had to quickly follow him. As a result, Loses who suddenly stopped after just a few steps. Thanks to Avril's quick reaction, she stopped in time, otherwise she would have tragically bumped into his back. Avril walked around to him and asked cautiously again, "What's wrong with you? Are you okay?" Loses who was still facially paralyzed, suddenly smiled. His smile was very beautiful, but Avril suddenly felt that his smile was weird. Loses who slapped the temporary meal card in Avril's hand and said, "Please order me a dish and I'll call you later." He raised the phone and watch on his wrist and walked away. Avril stood there blinded, and when she turned around to look for Loses who, he had disappeared. No wonder she was contacted by phone. Avril took one look at the 2 meal cards in her hand and resigned herself to finding a window to queue up. On the other side, Loses who crossed most of the restaurant and ran to hide behind a stone pillar to secretly observe the situation in a place. Recommendations and monthly votes are required. Beg on your knees. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Liu family's wife is so sweet. Author, Yoon. Chapter 189. Chapter 189. Rules are dead, people are alive. He originally thought that it would take some effort to find Zhang Wanan, but he didn't expect to see her so easily in the crowd. Loses who doesn't want to go there yet, he wants to watch from a distance now. The little girl was sitting there by herself at the moment, looking around. She probably ran too fast to eat after class and left her friend behind. As he expected, Zhang Wanan suddenly reached out and started waving his hands desperately. Loses who looked over and found that the person receiving the signal was Sujiao Xiao. He was searching like a headless fly at first, but when he saw Zhang Wanan's hand, he instantly became happy. Hua, holding the dinner plate, ran towards Zhang Wanan. I don't know what he said after he passed by, but Zhang Wanan actually raised his finger with a playful smile and began to swear, and then Sujiao Jiao sat opposite her and blocked her. Loses who thought it was just the two girls. Just when he was about to go to Avril to get food, two people flashed across his peripheral vision. He instantly stopped and hid behind the pillar again. He stared there for a while, and sure enough, the person who flashed in his peripheral vision was sitting next to the two girls. When he saw those two people, he could no longer remain calm. Loses who thought for a while, and simply stopped hiding and walked directly towards the dining table. Classmate, how is it appropriate for boys and girls to sit at the same table and eat? Have you forgotten the school rules? He walked over and knocked on the table and said seriously. Rules are dead, people are alive. Brother Shui, who do you think takes the rules seriously? He Chiu said while pointing at the people sitting in all directions with his chopsticks, but he didn't even look at Loses who. One glance. That's right. Zhang Wanan lowered her head and filled her mouth without forgetting to echo. No one will care, it's okay, brother Sujiao Jiao is also a pure foodie. Like Zhang Wanan, she doesn't even raise her head when speaking and only focuses on eating. This is the first time that Loses who is so ignored by others. He keeps calling him senior brother, but he doesn't even look at him. What's going on? Are senior students so disrespected these days? He stood silent for a while. He didn't say anything, and the heartless children thought he was gone, but Zhang Baihui noticed something. He slowly raised his head and his face was full of disbelief. Seeing that someone finally noticed him, Loses who shouted seriously again, I will take care of it, Zhang Wanan. Huh, Zhang Wanan, who was suddenly called, looked up in confusion. Even Sujiao Jiao and He Chiu lost their composure when they heard the voice, and also raised their heads following the voice. Xiao's Huzi, Zhang Wanan called uncertainly. Zhang Wanan thought she was dreaming. It wasn't until Loses who came up behind her and grabbed her collar that she realized that it was real and not a dream. Zhang Wanan stood up and hugged Loses who so excitedly that her chopsticks fell to the ground. Why are you here? She hugged Loses who and asked excitedly. How would I know that you violated the school's rules if you don't come? Loses whose face didn't look good, and he was a little gloomy. Zhang Wanan giggled and was about to repeat what He Chiu said, rules are dead, people are. Shut up, you have more reasons. Loses who interrupted her directly. I saw those people scratching their heads in embarrassment. They didn't know what to say for a while, and they were no longer as articulate as they were just now. Zhang Wanan still smiled playfully and asked, why are you here? Do you miss me? Loses who asked her a question instead of answering. Zhang Wanan nodded obediently, I thought about it. Well, that's right. I sensed that you were thinking about me and parachuted into your school. Loses who replied seriously. Really? Zhang Wanan looked in disbelief. I guess you are here to give a speech at the school? I will be on stage soon. It will be a lifelong opportunity to see my senior brother give a speech. Zhang Baihui, who had been silent for the whole time, suddenly spoke calmly. End of this chapter. The Lu family's wife is so sweet. Author, Yun. Chapter 190. Chapter 190. The guy who can't stand up to the wall with mud. Is it really okay to have such low emotional intelligence? Loses who thought about it and turned around to look at him coldly with a bad expression. Su Jiaojiao and He Chiu also looked at Zhang Baihui dumbfounded. They didn't know where he got the courage to mess up Lu Zizhu. Just looking at that look was enough for him, but he still wanted to commit suicide. Feeling a bit ignorant. So you're here to give a speech? No wonder you're dressed so well. Why didn't you tell me? Zhang Wanan's eyes sparkled even more when she heard that he was here to give a speech, as if she was the one who was going to give a speech later. Lu Zizhu looked back at Zhang Baihui before turning back to Zhang Wanan and said, I want to give you a surprise. It's a surprise. The moment I saw you, I almost laughed out loud. If I hadn't been afraid of embarrassment, Zhang Wanan said the last part in a low voice, only the two of them heard it. I have to accompany you when you are embarrassed, Lu Zizhu said lovingly, touching her head. I just saw you here, hurry up and carry it yourself. I can't carry it anymore. Avril suddenly ran over, took the dinner plate, and stuffed it into Lu Zizhu's arms. She really couldn't lift it. After finishing her meal, she was confused when she saw so many people and had no idea where Lu Zizhu was. She had promised to call, but she didn't have any extra hands. When I was crazy, I suddenly saw the tall man standing over there. Everyone in the restaurant was wearing school uniforms. Only Lu Zizhu was wearing a well-tailored suit, so he was easy to see. She ran towards her target, and it was true. Sister Avril. Are you here too? Zhang Wanan's eyes lit up again when she saw Avril. Avril put down the plate of dishes and touched Zhang Wanan's head and said gently, yeah, are you surprised? Zhang Wanan nodded vigorously, then she took Lu Zizhu and Avril and looked far away and asked doubtfully, where's brother Jinchu? He should be here too, right? Why didn't you see him? Zhang Wanan, why do you always think of him? Lu Zizhu's tone was full of helplessness when he said this. How could he compare to Gu Jinchu, who made Zhang Wanan miss him so much? I didn't. I just felt that the three of you were inseparable, so I thought he would come too, Zhang Wanan explained. Avril suddenly laughed and said, it depends on what happened if we were inseparable. He won't come for a speech like this. A guy who can't hold up a wall with mud. When Avril finished speaking, she suddenly covered her mouth in panic and looked at Lu Zizhu and then at Zhang Wanan. Lu Zizhu knew what she was afraid of and comforted her, it's okay. The speech is not a secret. Some people have already mentioned it, so don't worry about it. This time Lu Zizhu did not look at Zhang Baihui with cold eyes, because he was replaced by the eyes of Su Jiaojiao and He Chiu, but they were not as scary as him. That's good. I thought I would let it slip. I'm already hungry. Let's eat. Avril looked at the few people who were guarding a plate of food but didn't eat in a strange way. Lu Zizhu didn't say anything, but sat on the other side of Zhang Wanan and gave Zhang Wanan his chicken legs, eat more and grow stronger. Zhang Wanan smiled at him and started to eat. The other people also started to use their chopsticks. After lunch, Zhang Wanan took Lu Zizhu's hand and walked out. It's over, I was abandoned again, life is really hard for a single person, Avril said as she watched the two go out and poked at the rice on the plate. It's okay, Sister Avril, you can come with us later, Su Jiaojiao said to her. They met once, at Zhang Wanan's birthday party, and they played games together that time. Although they weren't very close, they knew each other more or less. Okay, I wish someone could take me in. Avril felt very happy when she heard that Su Jiaojiao could help her. End of this chapter.